We think that the moon landing, or the first moon landing, was important because it was a big boundary we broke. We were breaking the boundary because we were the first people or first country to have a man on the moon. This was important because during this time we were in the Cold War, and the Cold War was a very close war, and America or Soviet Union, one of them needed a big push to help win it. They were both competing to get to the moon. They were both sending space shuttles up, or satellites, but America was the first people to get there. When we got there, it gave America a really big morale boost, and it helped boost us to win the Cold War. That is why we think the moon landing was important. Where it all started. The reason the or the space race started is because we were in a war with the Soviet Union, the Cold War, and we were doing anything we could to look better than them. So, if we were to get to the moon first, we would look more technically advanced than them, and it would show everyone that we were more technically advanced, and that a free and democracy government is better. So before it led up to the moon landing, the USSR was the first country, or between us, to get something orbiting the Earth, and it was Sputnik 1. When Sputnik 1 was launched, it was very bad for the US. It meant that the Soviet Union was ahead of us, and if they wanted to, we thought they could launch a nuclear warhead from space. And this meant that we needed to work harder and faster to get it back with them. And then in 1958, NASA directed USA's first satellite launch. It was Explorer 1. Dwight Eisenhower was the one that signed to create NASA. The NASA stands for National Aircrafts and Space Administration. They work specifically on space exploration, and so they were working on exploring space. And then in 1959, the Soviet Union, they launched Luna 2, which was the first probe to hit the moon. Then in 1961, they sent Yuri Gagarin in a spacecraft capsule named Vostok 1, and he became the first person to orbit the Earth. America could see that they needed a big step to catch up with the Soviets, so in March 1961, NASA sent Project Mercury with chimpanzees inside to do their final test flight. And that is the historical context. After Russia sent Vostok 1, America took a big step forward when in 1961, NASA sent Project Mercury. In May 5th of 1961, NASA sent Alan Shepard, and he became the first person in space. Then later that month, JFK would say the U.S. would land on the moon before the end of the decade. Almost a year later, in 1962, John Glenn would become the first American to orbit Earth. At the end of 1962, NASA set their plans for Apollo in place. NASA had about 34,000 employees working for them on this mission. They were moving along well with Apollo, but sadly there was a great setback. It was January 1967, and 3 astronauts were doing a test simulation. The astronauts' names were Gus Grissom, Roger B. Chaffee, and Edward H. White. Sadly, during this flight simulation, the simulator caught fire and they passed away, but this didn't stop NASA from still working hard on Apollo 11. And then, in December 1968, the U.S. finally got a person to orbit the moon. This mission was Apollo 8, and we sent astronauts James Lovell Jr., Frank Borman, and William Anders. They were launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida. This was huge for America in the space race. Then on July 16, 1969, 3 astronauts, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins, took Apollo 11 on the first moon landing attempt, and Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon. This meant that America had officially won the space race, and this was a huge confidence and morale boost for America. the impacts of the moon landing. I'm going to first talk about the impacts it had on the U.S. The impacts it had on the U.S. was a great morale boost. It made us look it made our technology look better, which made us look stronger from our enemies, and it helped us win the Cold War. Now, how it helped us win the Cold War is because with this morale boost and us looking like we had better technology, it made us feel stronger. We were technically stronger, and it helped us get that final push to win. Now, the impacts on the USSR is that they had a bad morale boost, but they still had good technology because they were very close to the moon before we got there. But this didn't help them win the war, and those are the impacts that it had on the USSR and America. In conclusion, we think that the Apollo 11 moon landing was a big breaking point in history, or was a breaking boundary, because first, we were the first people to land on the moon. Second, we won the space race, which made it so we could win the Cold War. And third, it helped our technology for space travel, our rockets, aircrafts, and everything about space, a lot about flying. It boosted all that. We knew a lot about it. And since then, we've learned a lot more about it. This is a This event affected a lot of history, and it is still affecting history today. Since we went there, we've been back to the moon multiple times, and it is something we will continue to do. So maybe eventually we go to the moon and have people live there. So that is why we picked this topic, and thank you for watching.